Blog Talk Radio.
Welcome to On Trial, starring Mark Radulich, also starring Sean Comer. Hope you're ready, Hollywood, because you're on trial.
Be seated. Court is in session. Welcome to a Radulich Broadcasting Network presentation of On Trial. Tonight, we are putting a masterpiece of cinematic fare on trial. The Halle Berry, Sharon Stone hit for all the ages. And when I say hit, I mean it was nominated for several Raspberries, including Worst Picture, Worst Actress, Worst Director, and Worst Screenplay. People loved it. Catwoman, 2004 American superhero film based loosely on the DC comic character. And I am one of your hosts, the mandated reporter, your pal Weezy, and frankly, I'm mortified, Mr. Mark Radulich. And joining me in the prosecutor's chair tonight, what an easy job he has here, ladies and gentlemen. Easy meat. Easy picking. Mr. Sean Comer, how you doing, sir?
Harvey Dent for the prosecution, my tallest.
All right, let's get into this thing. Now, we had an agreement before this that I can only mention Halle Berry's figure. Once.
You get to mention her figure and the outfit as a plus once.
That can't be the sum total of the argument.
I, on the other hand, I can spank the abuse of that element like a bad baby all throughout my case, all that I want to. I just want you from leaning on Halle and her berries as your one and only positive point of this entire ridiculous boondoggle of a movie.
I'm going to say right off the bat, in earnest, and integrity is important to me. I think the core of this podcast has to be integrity. That if the defense isn't coming from a place of some degree of honesty, then this just becomes stick and slide. And I have to say, I laughed my ass off at this movie. I watched it late last night. I fell asleep, unfortunately. I was very, very tired. So I picked it up again this morning from where I left off, from hence I left. And I had a good time watching it. I'm not saying, before we get into the prosecution and defense, that I would put this up against, Richard Donner's Superman 2 or anything like that. I don't think I'd even put this up against Suicide Squad. But, I mean, look, I've watched a lot of movies since we started doing Long Road to Ruin and On Trial and Damn You Hollywood. And I have to say, I wasn't bored. I was entertained. So the arguments that I will put forward tonight do come from a place of honesty. I mean, there's some showmanship here, as there always is with me. But I will be speaking from the heart. So right off the bat, let's just get the housekeeping out of the way. As I said, Catwoman 2004, DC Comics, Warner Brothers joint. That's very, 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 very loosely, one might even say minimally inspired by the Catwoman character. And really this is supposed to be, they were trying to do, and Sean can get into the details of this, they were trying to do more with the Michelle Pfeiffer Catwoman character from Batman Returns. And it just didn't work out that way. But, they thought they had themselves a hot property on their hands. So they went with this, eventually played by Halle Berry joint. And, it is what it is. The thing made it was budgeted about $100 million. It didn't even make its initial budget, so big time flop. We talked about already that it's already been, it was nominated for a bunch of raspberries, and Halle Berry herself said when she actually showed up in person to collect her with her Academy Award in hand for Monsters Ball. She said, "Thank you for putting me. I want to thank Warner Brothers for putting me in this piece of shit movie."
That struck me as a very kind of Owen Hart moment of hers. Showing up to accept the Razzie with the Academy Award in hand.
Oh yeah, I think she should have owned that shit and be like, "I'm number one," just on a victory lap.
Well, she, in her own way, she kind of did.
Yeah, but this film is notorious for how much people hate it, and and when I said I was going to defend this thing, people looked at me cross-eyed and said, "What? How could you possibly? What's the plan here, Radulich?" So you shall find out shortly. All right, baby, hit me with some notes.
Warner Brothers decided to announce their Catwoman spin-off in June 1993. Oddly enough, just as they were starting to move forward with development on Batman Forever, the third movie in their then-running franchise, which was preceded by the absolutely absurdly fuck-you-money ridiculous Batman, and the slightly less successful but still pretty well-received Batman Returns. Namely, almost anybody would argue the absolute most entertaining, successful aspect of Batman Returns was Michelle Pfeiffer's performance as Catwoman, despite the fact that it departed virtually entirely from every known aspect of the character from the comics, the 1966 TV show, the animated series, yada yada, so on and so forth. In fact, it was such a hit that there were plans right away to set her off into her own movie. In fact, Michelle Pfeiffer, for the time being, was going to reprise her role. Tim Burton was going to direct, and we had Denise Denovi attached as producer, and a fellow by the name of Daniel Waters attached to write, all of whom were previously involved in Batman Returns. However, things started to fall apart a little less than a year later. By January 94, Tim didn't know whether he wanted to make Catwoman or if he wanted to adapt Edgar Allan Poe's The Fall of the House of Usher. On June 16, 1995, to pin it down to an exact date, Waters handed in his Catwoman script to Warner Brothers. Yay! Problem was, he handed it in the exact same day that Batman Forever was released, and while Burton was still on the fence about whether or not he wanted to direct. The reason Waters said it was arguably a mistake is because Batman Forever was the start of that era when Warner Brothers wanted to make a Batman that the whole gosh darn family can love, which we get later with Lego Movie. And, he turns in what he describes as, quote, definitely not a fun for the whole family script. And as things progressed, by August, Michelle Pfeiffer was saying that she was still interested in the spin-off, but that now being a mother and having commitments to other projects, and as she would reveal later, really having not loved the whole experience of wearing the suit in Batman Returns, she wasn't quite as sunny about her involvement as she was previously. The project would then spend years in development hell trying to get off the ground, and also going through a couple of people who at one point or another were attached to play the lead role. Ashley Judd at one point was set to star in the lead as recently as 2001. She dropped out. Nicole Kidman was also considered after Ashley stepped aside, but that was also right around when the studio decided that they wanted to go with recent Oscar winner Halle Berry. We got Academy Award-winning costume designer Angus Strafey, who put together that outfit and said, I swear I'm trying to keep a straight face while I say this, We wanted a very reality-based wardrobe to show the progression from demure, repressed patience to the sensual awakening of a sexy warrior goddess. Oh, bull fucking shit. Harley actually went through quite a little bit of intense training. In fact, she took on Harley Pasternak as a personal trainer in June 2003 to really get herself in shape for the part. And they even brought in, I swear, hand to God, I am not making up the following words to come out of my mouth, choreographer Ann Fletcher to develop Catwoman's signature style and teach Barry how to think like a cat. I wish to God I was making that up, because I could just start making random mouth noises, and it would have made more sense than we're going to bring someone in to teach you how to think like a cat.
No cat expert.
But then that brings us to Herr Director Pitoff. Yes, that's his name, Pitoff. Yes, I know. It sounds like Homestar Runner spitting Teddy Grahams everywhere. But no, this strapping French lad was brought in to direct a movie based on one of DC's most iconic and beloved characters. Brought in a guy who just goes by Pitoff. I think from now on, when people ask my name, I'm just going to make a fart noise and see how it goes over. But, hey, he came in with a vision for the movie. And I quote, I checked out some to see how Catwoman is treated in the comics to make sure that our Catwoman was in the same vein. But I didn't want to be too influenced by the comic book, because the whole point of the movie is to be first a movie and to be different. Different from Batman, different from Spider-Man. This movie has its own identity. I try to find my sources more in the character of Catwoman herself. To me, the Catwoman we're filming now with Halle Berry is the continuity of the others. She's different than Michelle Pfeiffer's character, different from anybody who's played Catwoman in the past, but she is Catwoman. When you look at the differences between the comic book Catwoman and on the TV or movie Catwoman, they are different, but there's a feeling that they are the Catwoman. Halle brings her own personality to her attitude and to the outfit. No, folks, that's not me reverting to Long Road to Ruin mode and doing shtick. Not entirely. That's an actual quote. Word for fucking brain-damaged chimp word. So, yeah, that's where all that went. And now let's run this down by the numbers and see how Cthulhu's vision of Catwoman went over. Well, for starters, on a budget of $100 million, $82.1 million. Ouch. That's a cold slap to the catnips. As for the overall critical response, well, okay, let's be entirely fair. Yes, it only made $16.7 million in its opening weekend in 3,117 theaters, and yes, it came in third next to The Bourne Supremacy and iRobot. But It has a 9% freshness rating on Rotten Tomatoes based on 179 reviews. 9%. Didn't crack double digits. Just missed. On Metacritic, 27 out of 100 based on 35 critics indicating, oh, this is a no-shit statement. Generally unfavorable reviews. Roger Ebert ranked it as one of his all-time most hated films. As he put it, filmmakers gave little thought to providing Barry with a, quote, with a strong character, story, supporting characters, or action sequences. We'll get more into that once I present my case, such as it were. This was also the movie that famously made Arizona Republic film critic Bill Muller recommend that Halle Berry give back her 2007 Academy Award. As Mark mentioned, 7 Razzie nominations in 2005, including Worst Supporting Actress for Sharon Stone, Worst Supporting Actor for Lambert Wilson, Worst Screen Couple, Halle Berry, and either Benjamin Bratt or Sharon Stone. It won Worst Picture, Worst Actress, Worst Director for Petui, and Worst Screenplay. And as Mark mentioned, she arrived at the ceremony to accept her Razzie in one hand, her Monsters Ball Oscar in other, and said, quote, "First of all, I want to thank Warner Brothers. Thank you for putting me in a piece of shit, god-awful movie. It was just what my career needed." And, oh God, this was the one that really hurt my heart. There was indeed a Catwoman video game. It got mostly negative reviews, but it hurt because it featured the voice talent of my dear sweet Jennifer Hale, taking the place of Halle Berry. And, oh, FemShep. No. Why did you have to be dragged down by this? But that's really about it. About the only other thing I would note is that, hey, every time you see Sally on screen, say hello to future star of Family Guy, Alex Borstein. Yeah, it gets slightly more tolerable if you just hear all her dialogue in Lois Griffin's voice.
All right. I'm sorry.
And goddamn sweet cup and cakes do I mean slightly.
All right, so a bit of a plot synopsis. Halle Berry plays a character named Patience Phillips. She's an artist and graphics designer for a beauty products company, cosmetics company named Hader Beauty. She goes through all of the standard superhero plot points. You know, she's a bit of a schlump, and she's down on her luck, and she's abused and bullied, and she's demure in manner, which allows her to get bullied and all of that stuff. And, of course, she works for terrible people who do terrible things. Unfortunately for her, those terrible things include, but are not limited to, making a face cream that will turn your skin to marble if you keep using it. But if you stop, it'll peel off. Quick side note, there's a drug called Lamictal in the mental health field where it'll help you with your depression and anxiety, but in a small percentage of people, it'll also peel your skin off. I always enjoy telling that to people. Anywho, so yeah, if you stop using the product, your skin peels off. You keep using it, you become a supervillain. Anywho, she accidentally discovers this, and because they want to release this product and make millions and millions of dollars, the bad guys have her killed. And killed she is. However, throughout the first act of the movie, she's visited a few times by an Egyptian Mao cat, and this particular cat finds her washed ashore and imbues within her the spirit of the Catwoman, and she is reborn as a Catwoman. She finds this out from the Cat's owner, Ophelia Powers, who's the professor, who just really is there to give exposition on what in the hell happened to her and why it happened and all of that. So she realizes she's been killed, and and the rest of the movie is figuring out why she was killed and then seeking revenge on those who did it. Along the way, again within the first act and leading into the second, she meets Benjamin Bratt, who plays a detective. They meet, they fall in love. He finds out that she's Catwoman. She's framed for murdering her bad guy boss, who is played by the same guy who, what was his name in the Matrix? His character's name in the Matrix. It doesn't matter. Lambert Wilson is the actor's name. He plays George Adair. And he actually doesn't know about the side effects of the product. It's his wife, Sharon Stone. Now, there's a subplot here where Sharon Stone was the face of the company, and George Adair was the guy running the show, and he pushed her aside when she turned 40 and replaced her with this young chippy. So she's jealous and pissed off and bitter. She ends up killing him, sets up Catwoman as the patsy. She gives herself up, ends up going to jail for a little bit, and she realizes that she's got to stop them from putting this product out there. People are going to get hurt. So she escapes from her jail cell in a very funny sequence, in my opinion. I laugh my ass off at this. After the cat comes back to inspire her, by the way. There's a final confrontation between her and the Sharon Stone character, where like a good villain, like all good villains, dies via falling after hanging precipitously by her hand. And she tries to save her, can't do it. She ends up falling to her death. Now at this point, Benjamin Bratt knows that she's the Catwoman, and she decides that she's cleared of all of her charges, but what to do about their relationship, and she decides that it's not going to work, and that she has newfound freedom as the mysterious Catwoman, and she's going to continue to live outside the law, and that's how the movie ends. I'm not going to get into all the stuff about the Alex Borstein character. She's mostly there for comic effect. She's the best friend. That's it. That's her role. Literally every plot point you've ever heard about the best friend role in any movie, that's what she does. All right. The prosecution, make your argument, sir.
Thank you, Your Grace. Little history lesson, folks. Catwoman was actually based originally on one of the original, and to this day, quintessential symbols of female sexual empowerment. 1930s film star Jean Harlow. She made an instant impression on Batman co-creator Bob Kane. As he put it, she seemed to personify feminine pulchritude at its most sensuous. Well, ultimately, Bob Kane and Batman co-creator Bill Finger, I'm sorry, I want to make sure that I got his first name right, ended up creating a supervillain like no other that they had concocted up to that point. A foil for Batman like no other. A truly romantic flame, but one who could also match the Caped Crusader move for move in a head-to-head chess game. She wasn't a killer. She was conniving. She was scheming. She was Machiavellian. But she played both sides. She was Batman's antithesis. She was brilliant. She was capable. She was independent. Now flash forward a little ways. Flash forward past all of the, well, for lack of a better word, nunfuckery of the Golden and Silver Ages. And let's take a look at how her origin was reinvented by writer Frank Miller in Batman Year One. We instead meet Selina Kyle right around the time that Bruce Wayne has just started Batmaning. And at the time, she's surviving on the streets by her wits and by becoming a dominatrix. But at the same time, she's also desperate to break away from an abusive former boyfriend who also happens to be her pimp. At the same time, she's also in charge of Holly Robinson, this young runaway who idolizes her, looks up to her. Selina Kyle is Holly's role model. But at the same time, Selina regards her as being far too young to survive her own on the streets the way that she does. So they share a home together. And ultimately, as Selina sees everything that's going on around her, she starts to fear for her life, begins to study self-defense, the martial arts, and begins to realize that she wants to break free from this. She starts off with just a little bit of burglary, ends up donning a catsuit costume to conceal her identity. Of course, one that her now former pimp gave to her the day that she told him she was leaving. And there it is. You have an icon who's born. You have one who's physically capable, who's brilliant, who's headstrong, and the kind of character who owns her sexuality. As I would say, someone who almost weaponizes it, really. Doesn't rely on it strictly, but realizes its effect, recognizes its usefulness, and adds it to part of her arsenal, part of how she survives. She embraces that aspect. This is one thing that Pittstain gets entirely wrong with his take on the character, and that he might have gotten right. Well, as Burton might have as well. No, actually, I'll come back to that. I'll come back to Tim A. That Pitou would have gotten right had he actually perhaps read a little bit more. And that is, he made the mistake of reducing her to that element. It's not an empowerment thing with her. It's not one aspect of her character that she owns and embraces. All it is it's just a suddenly jarring 180 that she goes through after a catastrophic accident and a weird incident where a cat belches in her mouth or something. See, and this movie means to cop Tim Burton's origin story, which was a fucked up little bit of what the fucking fuck itself. But at the same time, what Burton and, more importantly, what Michelle Pfeiffer really understood is that they crafted a version of Catwoman that took her femininity and made it an aspect of her arsenal. Sneaky, subtle little bit of it, a way to draw her foes into a false sense of security, especially if she was going toe-to-toe with a male. That is not what this movie does. This movie dumbs her down to that. It dumbs everything down to that. Right down to the fact that we're talking about a movie that views makeup as a superpower. Super-powered makeup. That's this supposed brilliant woman's plan behind how she's going to empower the women of the world with makeup. Oh, ye gods. You know what though? Why stop? I'll tell you what. I've got this idea. I've got this great idea for a movie. It's going to blow your mind. It is going to revolutionize comic book movies as we know them. Here's what I'm going to do. I am going to make a movie about a hermaphroditic 5-legged unicorn that shits explosive potatoes. And the entire score is going to be excerpts from Rigoletto. And she's going to fight a leprechaun with a 15-inch penis. Because he plans to use his glittery jism to coat the world in his sparkly image. And nothing will ever be dull or matte-colored again. And I am going to call this movie Superman. What? What? Don't laugh. You can't tell me that I can't do that. You can't tell me that I can't take something that begin to resemble what I'm calling it and go ahead and call it that. It's my artistic vision. You can't grudge that. It's my vision of Superman. If I want to say that Superman is a 5-legged hermaphroditic unicorn, goddammit, Superman is a hermaphroditic 5-legged unicorn, and you will embrace the fact that he poops explosive taters.
It's the problem. I'm okay with it.
Hey, even better. I got a better idea. We are going to take DC's most iconic villain, one of the greatest serial killers in all comic history, a madman, an agent of chaos, a clown prince of crime. We're going to cover that fucker in stupid-looking tattoos. We're going to give him a Lil Wayne grill. We're going to shove his ass into a gaudy-looking sports car with underglow. And we're basically going to make the Joker the Juggaloker. Why not? Apparently, we're allowed to just take anything we want to, just say that it's this character or this thing, and everybody else is just supposed to accept that it is. Because the fact is, and it seems like we keep coming back to this, if you are going to continue to keep adapting these characters, you lose the right to say, well, we don't have to adhere to canon because we're not making it for the comic book fans or just for the people who read the comics. Bullshit. If you weren't, you wouldn't have such a hard-on to obtain the license rights. You're clearly doing it so you can appeal to that audience. It's painfully obvious that you are, regardless of the fact that you've tried to extract everything else that would be in association with that property from this movie. And as I will demonstrate throughout this trial, by doing so, by going and trying to do something that he thought was fresh and different while completely ignoring the whole basis for the character and everything that made her appealing and everything that gave her the staying power that she's had, he ultimately ended up setting the efforts to portray her successfully in her own solo movie and as a major character in any movie back quite possibly, arguably, decades. It will be irrefutable. It will be glorious. I probably got that part of the trial wrong. I don't speak lawyer.
No, your witness is fine. Okay. I want to thank the prosecution for making part of my case for me. I don't need to go back over it again. He did an excellent job of saying that We live in a creatively open, some might even say relativistic world. And while I don't personally embrace the philosophy of relativism, many people do. And so it is absolutely a thing that can be done and is done to assume a licensed property, use it as an inspiration for a piece of artwork, and take it in any direction that you want. You read, prosecution earlier read a quote from the director, and, he did it in his fun French accent, and that's fine. But I want to go back to it, because what he says here is important, and it needs to be considered. So it checked out to see some of how Catwoman is treated in the comics to make sure that our Catwoman was in the same vein. But I don't want to be too influenced by the comic book, because the whole point of the movie is to first be a movie and to be different. And let's stop there. Yes, we have an accepted form of Catwoman, but I admit to you that the Catwoman in Batman Returns didn't look like no Catwoman I knew. It's maybe a bad parody of the Julie Newmar version of the character, but that's about it. It's still Tim Burton's reimagining of what the character should be. And there were people who were fine with that. So again, why not use the character as an influence for a story you want to tell about a different kind of character? But let's talk about the movie itself, shall we? Let's talk about, instead of always being so focused on the source material or what the expectations are, let us look at what these hardworking professional individuals crafted for our amusement. And let's not be caught up in labels and titles. Things sometimes take on a new role that maybe was not intended. This might have been intended as an action-adventure piece. But upon reviewing it today, it occurred to me that this is actually a parody. It's one of the best parodies I've ever seen, actually. It's a parody of the superhero genre. It's a parody of the notes and the tropes that are complained about to this day in one of the most successful superhero franchises of all time, the Marvel Cinematic Universe. What's the big complaint that everyone comes away with from a Marvel movie? Oh, Jesus. It's the same story told again and again and again. Jesus Christ, Doctor Strange is basically the magic version of Iron Man. I'm not saying I agree with that, but it's said. People say it. People believe it. People are sick to death of the superhero origin story. It's one of the reasons people were so frustrated, one of the many reasons people were so frustrated with the Ryan Reynolds Green Lantern movie. Other than the fact that they didn't get the character right, they were frustrated by the fact that this is yet another retelling of the same origin story. And Catwoman sends that up by doing exactly that. It is a paint by numbers to the letter superhero origin story with every single one of the tropes that people complain about today. And it was ahead of its time. In 2004, it was ahead of its time. It knew where the genre was going before the genre went there. Okay, it had the original Spider-Man to look at. It had other movies to look at as well, and they sent them up. They made fun of them with this movie. If you look at it through that prism, first of all, this movie is hilarious in its own right. But if you keep in mind that this is a parody of the superhero genre, it's even funnier to me. And to you. I beseech you, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, to watch this thing thinking about how ridiculous some of these tropes are and how overused they are and how Catwoman handles them. And I think you'll split your sides laughing. I really do. But let's talk about the craft. Let us honor these people for looking at the picture that they made. Yeah, integrity and honesty is important here, and I think you need to give the devil his due. It's a very nice-looking picture. I have watched a lot of movies. I have complained a lot about direction, art direction, the look of a movie. And I have to say, Pitoff, for all the complaints you might make about this gentleman, did a very nice job of making a sharp-looking picture. There are some interesting camera angles that he uses. There's vivid use of scenery. I mean, a lot of the shots of the cosmetics building, I actually really enjoyed. I thought it looked great on screen. So, again, film being a visual medium, the film looks nice. It's not an incompetently shot movie. Another example of how it's shot is there's a bit where after Patience becomes a Catwoman, and I want to stress that, not the Catwoman, but a Catwoman, one of the many. When she becomes a Catwoman, there's a long shot of her on the phone traipsing about her apartment like a kitty cat. And I enjoyed how that was framed. And I give credit where credit is due. Halle Berry, God bless her, was directed to act like a cat. And if you've owned a cat, you know there are certain typical cat movements. There's a way that a cat moves from, say, the couch to the table, to this, to that. And she was doing all of that. And it's not like it's edited in such a way. There's no quick cuts. This is all one long shot of the camera following her around the apartment as she's balancing on the couch and walking around like a cat. Look, say what you will about this movie, but that was fun. That was creative. I enjoyed watching that. It made me smile. I got a giggle out of it. As far as performances go, Halle Berry was directed to act like a cat person. She's directed to act like a meek people pleaser, which I believe. Look, we've seen Halle Berry in some very forceful roles. I watched this first act of the movie before she becomes reborn as a cat person, and I believed, I was with her, I believed that she was this wimp that could easily be pushed around. I thought Halle Berry did a very good job of portraying the archetypal pre-superhero that's, again, just a schlump and a loser and a wimp. She played that to a T. The performance is at a minimum adequate and at best quite good. She handled all that well. When she becomes the cat person, look, you can argue with the choice the director made. You can't argue with the performance. Giving her a raspberry for worst actress, I think is unfair. I'm not sure if it's her who got it or Sharon Stone. They might have both gotten it, but it's unfair. It's unjust, and I won't stand for it. She did what was asked of her in the character. I believed she's a cat person, and that's really what you. She ceased to be Halle. I didn't see Halle Berry. I saw cat person. I never once got taken out of the film. As for the rest of the cast, Benjamin Bratt plays archetypal detective in a superhero film, slightly befuddled, a bit let down. If anything, he's a little less intense than, say, the same character, the same exact character in the show Arrow, okay? Or the same exact character in every other superhero movie where they're pursued by a single-minded cop. At least this one, this one is actually halfway reasonable. So Benjamin Bratt is perfectly adequate. You must give credit where credit is due. If the performance is adequate to good to excellent, you should call it that. And that gives the movie some degree of credit. This is not the worst movie I've ever seen by a long shot. And it's because of it looks nice and because of the performances. Which brings us to our villains, Sharon Stone and Lambert Wilson. Lambert. Every time I looked at Lambert Wilson, all I could think about was his character from The Matrix. And other than being a little less French this time, pretty much played the same character. He was directed to be shitty villain guy. He was shitty villain guy. It's fine. He really could have taken that character and put him into any one of the recent Marvel movies. Wouldn't have missed a beat. Same character. That's more of an indictment of the Marvel movies than it is this one, by the way. As for Sharon Stone, restraint isn't a word you hear often in movies these days. But I have to give Sharon Stone a lot of credit and teach off credit as a director. They could have gone over the top with this character, Laurel Adair. There was some restraint in her performance. I don't think it's fair to say it's the worst performance. I don't think it's fair to give her a raspberry for this. I believed if she was a 40-year-old fallen from grace beauty model that was bitter and angry and willing to commit murder by proxy to regain some sense of self. I actually like her story as a villain. She's been cast aside, and she sees an opportunity for revenge, and she takes it. It's actually, in that sense, a refreshing change from the I thought of. Think about the villain from Civil War. Think about Baron Zemo, who had things plotted so far out in advance, it became silly on inspection that if any part of this had gone awry at all, including things he couldn't have possibly planned for, the whole thing unraveled. She's just reacting. She's taking the cards she's dealt and she's going, hey, I can make cash out of it. That was a nice change of pace. There's not much to say about the story because, as I said, the story is really a send-up. The story is a mockery of the same exact story in your Spider-Mans and your other superhero movies, your Iron Mans, your Doctor Stranges. I mean, it's all a lot of it. The bones are very much the same. It's the dressing on the bones that changes. I might say. Lastly, and with Damn You Hollywood coming up, I want to go back to a gimmick that we go on there, but I feel like doing so makes my argument stronger. So I'm going to go ahead, if it pleases the court, I'm going to go ahead and do this, but in reverse of what we do on Damn You Hollywood. And I'm going to preface this by saying, just because most people don't like it or hate it, doesn't mean it's bad. I'll say it again. Just because the mob doesn't like it doesn't mean it's bad. And there were brave souls that have come online, a cesspool of hate and villainy like no other, and stood against the wind to give this thing a fresh review on Rotten Tomatoes. And I would like to share some of those with you now. That this thing is not the abhorrent creation of nonsense that everyone seems to think it is. And even if everyone does seem to think, that doesn't make it true. So, if you don't like my argument, why don't you listen to Daniel Etherington from Film 4, who said it's not as over the top as you might hope, but also not as bad. Daft and moderately entertaining. And you're so right, Daniel. You're so very right. I was moderately entertained by this thing. I giggled this morning when I watched it. And what should a movie do if not make you giggle, entertain you. Christopher Smith of the Banger Daily News says, widely considered a terrible movie, but if you enjoy the camp genre, it's a must-see. My point exactly, Christopher. My point exactly. It is, in fact, catnip. It is, in fact, camp on a catnip high. B-. Christopher Smith of the Banger Daily News. Jules Brenner of Cinema Signal says, a milking of the mediocre, but after this fall from grace, Barry's got 8 career leaps to go. Let's move on past that. Vince Kohler was pleasantly surprised with his new outing for Halle Berry. Yes, she does a fine job here. This should be pleasantly surprising. Jeffrey M. Anderson of Combustible Celluloid says, these are real reviews, people. This hilarious, sexy, exciting farce, did I mention this was a parody, is instead so consistently surprising and dazzling that I'm still not sure if it's a good bad movie or a good movie. Exactly. Open your hearts and I'll make you love me. And I will also make you understand that if you open your mind, you will see that we've been looking at this movie all wrong. It stands accused of being a terrible comic book movie. It is, in fact, not guilty. It is, in fact, a brilliant parody of a comic book movie. Michael LaSalle of the San Francisco Chronicle, he's a top critic, ladies and gentlemen, says it's an odd, idiosyncratic movie, dark in look and dark in spirit, that plays as a kind of pop culture investigation into the meaning of feminism and the options open to women in the modern world. He gave this 3 out of 4 stars. 3 out of 4 stars, ladies and gentlemen of the jury. Terry Lawson of the Detroit Free Press, also a top critic. Catwoman isn't really bad enough to be one of those awful movies we can't resist, nor is it incompetent enough to be the female Daredevil. I would agree with that. And I'm going to end this with About.com's Fred Toffel, because I think this sums up the whole thing. And if you haven't seen the movie to get where he's coming from, after I've convinced you that this is a brilliant movie that you really should sit through, go back and watch it just so you can understand what Fred Toffel of About.com is trying to tell you. They had me at the random basketball scene. The defense ref.
Oh, well, sacre bleu, monsieur défendeur et Michel Pitous. Afro-Wendell. Oh, you thought like a GSP, you have hit me in the face with the crotch of your argument. Oh, it's so bad it's good. Why didn't I see that? Well, butt on my croissant and call me Che Congo. Yeah, no. See,
all right.
I have no choice but to give my counterpart the mincing, mealy-mouthed C-3PO to my awesome immortal R2-D2 his due. He did make a couple of good points. I have to admit, I really cannot fault Halle Berry for this one, and not even for the reason you might be thinking, that I go along with her by saying that Warner Brothers forced her into a terrible movie. Now, you see, the fact is, this movie, to Halle Berry's credit, displays that she was much, much, much more, actually, than Bryan Singer allowed her to be in X-Men. Far more. She's every bit capable of carrying a comic book superhero movie. She has the physicality, she has the poise, she has the presence, She has legitimate acting chops. In fact, if you had taken this and made this a legitimate Catwoman solo movie, I would have been nothing less than thrilled to see Miss Berry play Selina Kyle. Nothing would have made me happier. Unfortunately, the problem is, at the same time that this movie showcases that, it also wastes it. And it wastes it in absolutely egregious fashion. Egregious, shameful fashion. Like the way that the entire first Fantastic Four movie wasted a bunch of good performances with the exception of Jessica Alba. Or the way that Mark Steven Johnson's Daredevil really took what was, I have to admit, a scene-stealing performance by Colin Farrell as Bullseye and chucked it into a dumpster fire. It took a shockingly capable little bit of work, good bit of acting, and wasted it on something that was unfortunately different, but not in the way my compatriot would have you believe. See, here's the thing about the word different, and he got that right as well. This is not your standard comic book superhero movie. But different does not mean bad. Different does not mean good. All that different means, for certain, is that it's not the same. I mean that in the sense that just because you set out to do something differently does not mean that you're going to do it better. And you know, I'll even say this. I would not be opposed to a Catwoman movie with some comedic flair to it, because the character has been played for laughs before. But it was done that way by writers and artists who had a sense not only for her, but the characters that she was working around, and did it in such a way that Selina Kyle, that Catwoman, was still funny, still down to earth, but still felt like Catwoman. I would point you towards any, and consider this a recommendation, by the way, any of the recent comics that have featured her alongside the likes of Poison Ivy and Harley Quinn. All of the characters feel like themselves. And yes, you know, I will agree with Kitov that everybody has portrayed Catwoman differently in their own way. They've added their own flair to it. Eartha Kitt and Julie Newmar, they added their own touches to it, along with Lee Merriweather, of course, on the 1966 Batman television series. All of them becoming synonymous with the role along the way, and arguably career-defining even, some would say, especially in Eartha Kitt's case. You look forward and, God, I feel like I'm going to get skewered probably by Alexa if she hears me say this. I believe it's Gray Delisle who voiced Catwoman in the animated series. Again, her own distinctive touch, the power in her voice, but the flirtatiousness, the sexuality, the slight little smoky quality to it. It was her own touch. You look at the comics, and you'll find numerous artists, so many different artists who have ever drawn Batman, so many writers who have ever written Batman, have depicted her in their own ways, a little differently, little different touches here and there. Arguably, I would say that my favorite depiction has been from Batman Arkham City, where she embodies, I think, everything that Bob Kane would have meant her to be, but with just the right touch of Frank Miller's hardness and capability and bravery. So, yeah, there are ways to do it differently, and you could have done it differently so that it was intentionally funny, but here's the thing. This was obviously not meant to be a farce. This was obviously intended to actually be a good action thriller that was trying to be humorous in places. And when I say trying, I mean trying far Fig Nugan too hard. Just the cat jokes. Oh, God. All the stupid motherfucking cat jokes. She walks up to the bartender and orders a White Russian, hold the Kahlua, and hold the whatever else. So she basically orders a glass of milk.
Okay, objection. I have one objection. Restraint was used in the amount of jokes they did. There were far, far less of that sort of thing. She rolled her R's once. She did the bit with the White Russian. And for the most part, they kept the cat jokes to a minimum, at least in comparison to Batman and Robin, where there's a great example of going overboard with that sort of thing. I think a lot of restraint was shown, quite frankly.
Your Holiness, if I kick you in the dick 5 times, do you praise my restraint if I don't rear back for a 6?
Yeah.
Let the record show the defense is a few fries shy of a Happy Meal. And clearly has a thing with letting people play fourth and long with his daddy bag.
I'm just saying,
anyway.
The Holy Hand Grenade tells us there is a certain number for a certain thing. One more is too much, one less is too little.
One day, Phoenix Wright, you and I will meet in person, and I will test this theory. And I wear heavy boots, sunshine. Anyway, so yeah, guess what? We have an unintentionally so bad it's actually funny movie. Yay! Hey, guess what? Taking a movie where you tried to do a good job and it ended up being shit. Movie. There was another Euro trash director who tried to do that, and not one single fucking person bought it when he said it either. It was Tommy Wiseau, and no, to this day, nobody buys that The Room was supposed to be a comedy. His best friend was in that movie, and in a book about it, he shot that shit right the fuck down. This was a movie that was meant to capitalize on a character that was featured in some critics even said, shockingly dark and violent Batman movie. And you're going to turn around and try to tell me, oh, it's supposed to be a farce, it's supposed to be different, it's supposed to be lighthearted. No, don't piss on my head and tell me, hey, let's go eat the yellow snow. Deadpool was a superhero farce because there was some respect for what that character is intended to be. You can have comedic moments in superhero movies where, yeah, you maybe poke a little bit of a jab at it, have a little fun with some references or some fan service. This was just over the top stupidity by somebody who clearly didn't know the character well enough to know what they were doing in terms of how to make it funny while still finding a way to make this character appealing and still finding a way to be true to it and finding a way to increase its value. And that is arguably one of its greatest overarching sins. And by it, I mean this movie as a whole, is the fact that, yeah, you made something that was so bad that it goes around the bend and transcends to the point where it's actually unintentionally good in a hilarious kind of way. But the problem also being is you gave way too much ammunition to the way wrong trigger-happy party. Hollywood executives. What's worse, oh, pobrecito, you gave it to Warner Brothers executives. Arguably the dumbest fucking pistachio brains of the lot. Because, you see, the whole problem is, ever since then, if you look at superhero movies that have been made since 2003, you'll notice there have not been a whole lot that have been led by female heroines, or even very many that have strongly featured female villains. And that's despite the fact that there are so very many that have been dying for a good movie for so long. I mean, yeah, granted, Fox tried with Elektra, but that was a fool's errand in the first place. 2 words, Jennifer Garner. Actually, scratch that. I object to myself. Alias was awesome. I want to pay respect to myself. Yes. I object to myself. I censure myself. One more remark like that besmirches a character who carried such an excellent ABC drama that gave rise to shows like Veronica Mars, and I will find myself in contempt of court, and I will owe myself an iced green tea latte. Venti. With 4 sweeteners. Preferably on my Starbucks gift card. Anyway, you take a movie like this that performs this badly, as is notoriously bad, gets absolutely shredded by critics and fans alike, has such ungodly, horrible Metacritic and Rotten Tomatoes scores, and it becomes an excuse, albeit a flimsy one, but still one that studios will throw out there for why the people holding the power and the purse strings and the pens will not greenlight female-driven movies. They will try. They will point this out and say, "Oh, look how poorly it drew. Look how bad the movie was. People just don't want to see women in leading roles in comic movies." And it becomes one more justification for why we don't have a Black Widow movie, why we're just now getting a Wonder Woman movie, why the hell we don't have a Miss Marvel movie, why I have not gotten my unbeatable Squirrel Girl movie. And so hence, thank you, Patorf. Thank you. Thank you for putting the bullets in the gun for them. But, we've talked about the big picture about it just about enough. Let's move on and talk about the actual movie itself, shall we? This is supposed to be a movie that's about female empowerment and empowered sexuality. No, it really isn't. Because that is where it shows absolutely no restraint. Its idea of showing empowerment is, we're going to take Halle Berry and strip her down to fetish wear. That's about it. It's there for eye candy. It's not remotely practical or held back in any way. What reason would there be for any vigilante to dress that way? I ask you. I mean, it's all kind.
I have an answer for that question. Yes, if you have any expert, and I happen to know one, in kink and fetishes, someone who actually I believe is a doctorate in kink and fetishism within the mental health milieu, would tell you that leather is empowering, and that the whole becoming a Catwoman was an empowering metamorphosis for her that was actualized and made physical by the use of leather. It was also mentioned in the movie that, I mean, you gotta give credit again where credit's due. They say in the movie, hey, I gave you that outfit to wear, on a date or whatever, and she says, oh, I'm never gonna wear it. That's not me. That's crazy talk. And so when she has this conversion where basically her id comes out of her and becomes her identity, a manifestation of that is that outfit. Is it practical? No. But, I mean, come on. They only started using practical outfits for superheroes post-Iron Man. But prior to that, they just aped whatever was in the comic book to the best of their ability, and it looked silly. That's why they stopped doing it.
Okay.
Why the X-Men all wear black leather.
Okay, and you know what? To a certain extent, knowing that I also have a friend of mine who would have probably also chastised me for that same statement, having a similar, I want to say measure, but a similar kind of expertise. Okay, I will withdraw that much, and I will redirect slightly. Yes, I will grant that was a nice gesture, and perhaps maybe even one of the movie's few genuine moments of putting some actual thought into its character. But the problem is, it doesn't really do much to develop her beyond that, or even before that. Whereas, if you're going to set something like that up, okay, you have yourself an opportunity. You might actually be on the right track to having something worth saying, but they don't. Far and away, vastly, it's just simply simply a woman going from a shy, slightly nerdy graphic designer to just all of a sudden being a sultry, slinky cat person with nothing else in between. Nothing else really explained, nothing else really explored, no subtlety to the character as she goes through this transformation. It's just boom, 0 to fetish wear. That's it. That is not really trying all that hard to make a point. It's not trying that hard to make the point that you would have anybody believe that you're trying to make. It's just simply a matter of the fact that you have a flimsy movie. Yeah, okay, maybe it looks good, but when it comes to modern movies, that's par for the course. I mean, that's almost not even praiseworthy. That's like praising the overall graphics of a modern video game. I mean, I would say that it's up to the standard of being a fairly good-looking movie for its time. Yeah, it's well shot. But it doesn't make an attempt to really make the character its own, to try to establish anything and set anything up with any ambition as far as telling a bigger story that maybe people might want to see retold in a future movie. There's no attempt at that. I mean, hell, Daredevil actually developed its character a little bit. Ghost Rider managed to develop Nicolas fucking Cage as Johnny Cage Evers. That's Johnny Cage. and now I just want to see a movie that's nothing but Nicolas Cage doing the spits and punching Wes Bentley in the penis.
Oh, boy.
Oh, fuck. Johnny Blaze. Oh, God. Next Mortal Kombat movie, it better stars Nicolas Cage, or I swear to Zod. Have him play Jax. Anyway. But that's about as ambitious as this movie gets. And really, the part that puzzles me is we have a movie in which Michelle Pfeiffer was meant to reprise her role from Batman Returns. Okay, so I'm confused here, Mr. Scribe. Were you going, if this is really in fact your script, and I wonder how much of this was really his, was your plan just to have her redo the entire origin story?
Oh, I think once they lost Michelle Pfeiffer and they had to recast, I think that's when they went back. Yeah, I think whatever the original plot, this was originally supposed to be a spin-off of Batman Returns. Once they lost Michelle Pfeiffer, I think they mothballed the whole thing, started from scratch, and it became its own entity.
Okay, well, as long as we're talking about the story, though, although I withdraw my previous statement, here's what I don't understand. You have this goofy-ass, whimsical story that pretty much rips off the whole origin of Michelle Pfeiffer's character in Batman Returns.
Objection.
Yes.
Not a ripoff. Not a ripoff. The cat imbues, and I am insulted by the word belches, by the way. It imbues the essence of the Catwoman in Halle Berry's version. In the Tim Burton version, she's bitten by a bevy of alley cats.
Well, gee, thank God the cat in this version didn't do what a real cat would do and just stick its pucker right up in Halle Berry's face. God only knows what kind of Catwoman we would have gotten then.
I'm just saying, accuracy plays a role. In one instance, you have a cat, a lead cat, a specific cat that is carrying on the tradition and the essence of the Catwoman all the way from ancient Egypt. Okay, this thing is the familiar of the god, if you will, Bat, B-A-S-T. And in the Tim Burton, there's none of that. It's just a bunch of alley cats biting her. And and through their cat saliva, she is somehow reborn.
Yeah, as I was saying when you objected, I was starting to say they just amped up the whimsy of it. That's part of cranking up the whimsy. Is she breathed in Mr. Cuddle's morning breath. And now all of a sudden she has magical cat powers. Again, keep in mind, up until my recent bout with singledom, I lived with someone who had 2 cats. I know about how they treat human space when they want something. It was 50-50 that she wasn't going to have her nose stuck up Chairman Meow's rosebud when he decided to share his fancy feast with her through the exit door.
Imbued with the essence of the Catwoman from ancient Egypt.
Yeah, imbued with the essence of the cat fart.
Listen, just because you don't like the ancient Egyptian religion doesn't mean it's not a good thing.
Well, and also, it's not even a very accurate portrayal of her as a cat person. Okay, yeah, you got the obvious stuff, but at no point did I see her rear back and give Benjamin Bratt a nice friendly headbutt. Where was that? Where was the part where, they go and do their little humpity bumpity, and he wakes up to all of a sudden find that she's curled up in a sock drawer.
Well, objection. There are several scenes where she's sleeping on a shelf.
On a shelf, yes, but there is no scene where she finds a box. You can't tell me that at no point does she come across a box and just all of a sudden just curl right up and make herself at home.
It's only a 90-minute movie. There's only so much time for this sort of thing.
Oh, yeah, they were probably saving that for the sequel.
Exactly.
Catwoman, Revenge of the Laser Pointer. Catwoman versus the sneaky cucumber. Ooh. But all of these points aside, this movie barely tries and accidentally stumbles upon getting something half-assed right. But the problem is, in all the efforts to try to make this movie so different and stand out and be so different from what so stupid little comic books. On the other hand, you had so many other stories that you could have told if you would have just paid attention. I mean, you could have taken just about any number of issues and called a story that would have been better than this without trying to be so damn overtly silly. Yes, it was different. Yes, it didn't want to be exactly like the comic books and it wanted to put its own spin on it. But you have to know the rules before you can break them. And this was a team that, possibly aside from Halle Berry, had no idea what the rules for this character were, so it had no business trying to break them. And it illustrates that different means neither good nor bad, but it definitely means not the same. The prosecution rests.
All right. And that brings us to the end of this podcast. I will say, in summation, in all honesty, I didn't think it was that bad. I mean, look,
I've seen worse.
If Robert Winfrey, who I'm sure is listening to this, were here right now, he would tell you this was the worst thing ever captured on celluloid. It is an insult to people with eyes and who have cats. But here's the thing. Robert has a very low tolerance for anything that is like remotely stupid. So, and there's a lot of stupid in this movie.
And yet he and I are huge such huge Invader Zim fans.
Yeah.
Which one of these days, Mark, TV party, Robert and I are going to bring you in on this.
Okay, I'm open. But I mean, the point that I was getting to was, I historically have a very high tolerance for a lot of nonsense. I don't want to go off on a tangent here. This is just an example. Look, I like last year's Ghostbusters. Speaking of white studios shit-can female-centric movies, look, I liked it. There was a lot about that movie that I know annoyed people, but there was a lot about it that I enjoyed. I legitimately was entertained by, and Robert and I argued about it pretty, and we really, it was one of those moments where we just sort of looked at each other and said, we are different people. and we can both look at the same stimuli and come to wildly different conclusions about it. And so something like a Catwoman, where it's a dumb movie. Look, I'm not arguing or for even logistically defend that this thing is high art.
It would have to improve
movie.
pretty damn greatly to be dumb.
But like I said, I laughed at parts. Not about the, I'd like a white Russian minus the vodka. Perfect. Not that
the vodka.
There were other things in the movie though that I thought were damn funny. I was entertained by a lot of it. So, as I say about comedy, comedy has one job: it's to make you laugh. If it doesn't make you laugh, it fails. If it makes you laugh, it succeeds. And it doesn't. And I don't care if it's Will Ferrell in Step Brothers, or it's the Kentucky Fried Movie. You should not. These things should not be, a thesis on astrophysics. They're meant to be entertaining. And as Robert would say, your mileage may vary on what entertains you. So, is Catwoman for everybody? Oh, God, no. Probably not for most people. But I dare say that non-comic book fans who have an investment in the character, who sat and watched this thing, would probably think it was fine. They would have no emotion about it one way or the other, and would probably be moderately entertained.
Yeah, but you know what? The whole thing is, though, is I do know the character, and I can't change that. I can't entirely change my prism through which I view the movie, and
that's fair.
And as a comic fan, you know what? I would absolutely love to one day see a great Catwoman solo movie. I think that would be something that would be truly groundbreaking, because not only would you have a movie, as I said before, that would join the very few that have had a female main hero or a female supervillain. You would have one that features a female anti-hero, and could almost be argued would be the first movie to ever really be based wholly on a villain rather than a hero.
Well, you accept the Gotham City Sirens movie that has Catwoman in it?
You mean the one they're making now?
Yeah.
Only technically, because I'm still utterly convinced that movie is going to blow goats.
You're probably right. Warner Brothers is glutton for fun. What? How is it that the team at Warner Brothers can competently put together Harry Potter movies to this day, but the team working with DC can't seem to find their way out of a wet paper bag?
Well, no, that's actually not even what Stuart and I wondered about on the most recent FPG News Rantcast that he and I did. We marveled that somehow marveled DC. Anyway, we were just gobsmacked that somehow DC manages to knock it out of the park like 95 times out of 100 with their animated stuff. I'll say they've gone downhill since they started making everything New 52 focused, but for the most part, it's still pretty damn strong stuff. Their full-length animated features and their series are both excellent. Arrow and about 50% of Legends of Tomorrow aside, their TV shows turn out to be consistently excellent.
What the hell is against 50% of Legends of Tomorrow? I've enjoyed that show immensely.
It was all right. I mean, I liked about the first half of it, but it really lost a whole lot of steam and has never really entirely sucked me back into it. It's still good. The Flash, I think that bunch can do damn near no wrong.
Yeah.
I'll even be entirely fair to Arrow and say when it's good, it's really fucking good. When it's bad, they can't make it any more obvious that they're just trying to get around the fact that Warner Brothers slapped them on the wrist and said, no, you can't have Batman.
Have you watched Supergirl since
insisted...
it moved to the... I'm sorry. Have you watched Supergirl since it moved to the CW?
Okay, now that would be another one that they pretty much nailed. I really enjoy Supergirl. I'm surprised at how much I enjoyed it, because that's not a character that I exactly go gaga over. But I was shocked at how good it really was, and I'm glad that it found a home on the CW, because I think even the brass at CBS would have realized that it would have just languished there.
Season 2 is so much better than Season 1.
Yeah. And yet, aside from most of the Nolan trilogy, they can't seem to get live action right somehow. And I just don't understand why. Well, okay, and I'll even go a step further. We talked about the shows. We talked about the animated stuff. The video games.
I have an answer
Arkham
for you.
games.
Hang
on, I'm not done.
Question. Okay, go ahead.
Hang on, Funshine Bear. I'm not done yet. The 4 Arkham games. Well, okay, correction. I've only played 3 out of 4 of them, but I've heard just about nothing but good things about Arkham Knight. Pretty much entirely nails the spirit of Batman. The first Injustice is one of my favorite games of all time, and I am stoked as all fuck for Injustice 2. I would just about shove all my money into a pneumatic cannon and fire it at WB Games and NetherRealm Studios if that could only come out just a little bit sooner. So I'm aching to play that. And yet you can get all this stuff right, and you're even doing marginally better with the comics. And yet, every time you retarded wank pheasants go to make a live-action version of one of your properties, I'm terrified of the fact that they've now got a Nightwing movie in the works. Because I would want a Nightwing movie to be so... I would want that to be good, because I love the Nightwing web series, the fan series that a bunch of cats raised some money and got to do on YouTube. That was really good. I liked that. I was moderately excited for the fact they were going to do a Titans series on TNT, because holy shit, live action Titans, bring it on. But now I just don't get it. What is it about trying to tell a story in 2 hours with, for really real, these people that just makes you fuckers shoot yourselves in the crotch?
All right, this is a 2-part answer. The first one, and I'm oversimplifying it just for the sake of time, and I don't know the further details of it, but basically, you're talking about 4 different divisions, one of which is split with another company. So you have the CW, which is hosting DC/Warner Brothers content on their network, and CW is a partnership between CBS and Warner Brothers. And basically, they're on an island. You know, they've got their own producers and writers and everything else, and they basically were told, go do shows for CBS that are going to air on the CW. No, you can't have Batman. Otherwise, go do your own thing. Try not to fuck it up. And so they just sort of exist on an island separate from the Warner Brothers live-action movie division. If you ever hear the animated group talk about themselves, they don't interact with the movie division at all. Warner Brothers Animation is its own thing, operates independently, and they don't have the interference that, from the movie executives that the live action does. And then games is games, again, its own thing. So, part of the reason why you have 3 examples of superior products versus the one that's inferior is the one that's inferior is controlled by the movie execs who, as Robert Winfrey and I talked about on Damn You Hollywood, invest themselves in these movie projects. And, they're paid a lot of money to guide ships. And a lot of these people lose their jobs after a while when they guide these ships into icebergs. But that's what happens, is they get involved and they have a belief or they have data that says this is good, this is bad, do this, not that. And that gets into the movie process. And, you have the success or failure record that they've got. Specifically the DC Cinematic Universe, its biggest problem was that in the wake of the Avengers, they were trying to respond at Comic-Con to that, and all they had in the can at that point was Man of Steel. And so they basically were like, fuck, we need, cinematic universes clearly produce billion-dollar projects. We need to catch up to Marvel, but all they had done at that point was Man of Steel, which was never intended to start off a cinematic universe, and was really the wrong way to do it to begin with. But again, Warner Brothers just saw money. They saw the success of the Avengers, and they saw Comic-Con coming up, and it's like we have to respond. And they responded with, we're going to do Batman versus Superman. That's our response to this. They did that without any plan, without a story, and the only reason why it's not as bad as it could have been was that Zack Snyder pretty much demanded another year. So it was delayed 1 year so that it could be visually better than what it would have been on the timetable he was originally given. The other problem coming out of that was, if you look at what went into Suicide Squad, they went into shooting that with a rough draft. I want to say whoever wrote that thing had basically sketches of a naked Harley Quinn that he submitted in some dialogue. They were like, shoot it, go. It was like shit written on the back of a fortune cookie. And so they really didn't have a tight script. They ran in with a first draft, and Warner Brothers was like, go, 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 because the other thing they did after that was they made a list. You see, they're like, okay, we're gonna do Batman versus Superman, and here's a fucking list of the movies we're gonna do. And it was just like they looked at the DC catalog and went, what are your top sellers? That's what we're gonna make a list out of. That's what we're gonna make movies out of. And that's really what it was. There's no plan here. There was no overarching story like there was with Marvel. And so they rushed projects into production and started shooting projects before they were well defined. And then due to responses they were getting, changed the projects entirely. So Batman v Superman had reshoots, which in and of themselves are not bad things, but that got changed from what it initially had intended to be. And Suicide Squad was completely altered from what the intention was, which is why there's basically another movie's worth of footage of the Joker and Harley Quinn lying on the cutting room floor that we'll never see, much to Jared Leto's regret.
See, well, no, I'm fine. I'm fine with that because Jared Leto is a heaping pile of twat frosting. And so I'm happy he got cut almost entirely out of the movie, and that's not just because I object to his portrayal of the Joker. It's because, if anything, that is largely what we've learned from the making of that movie, is that Jared Leto is really a pretty wretched human being. And I absolutely hope that he never gets anywhere near a DC movie again. And I would agree with you. David Ayer, it seems, had control of this movie taken from him. I would not go so far as to still say it was good when we saw the director's cut. And by the way, might I say, I have a conspiracy theory. God, if I keep coming up with these, I'm going to start to sound like Napier. as to why this has become such a thing. And it has nothing to do with showing the director's vision. Sometimes I think it's the fact that they figure apology that lets them get away with releasing a shit movie in the theaters in the first place. And they say, oh, well, we'll just have the director go and say that it wasn't his entire vision and that you should really check out the unrated Blu-ray when it comes out to really see a whole different version of the movie, and it might change your mind about it, man. It's the same thing that allows AAA video game publishers to get away with releasing seemingly half-finished shit like Assassin's Creed Unity because they figure, oh, well, who cares if it's borked as fuck? We'll just issue a day one patch, and that'll fix about 10% of it, and then we'll release a day 2 patch, and a day 4 patch, and a day 15 patch, and then we'll offer people who bought the games a free Ubisoft game under the explicit condition that they not sue us for how bad the game was. You joke, this happened. And it's a way to get around not actually releasing a good finished movie. They figure, so what if it sucks? We'll just recut it and make a whole other mint off the rental and home video market. And I'm really glad we've had a chance to talk about this for a little bit because I've been trying to find something on Comic Historian for when we do plugs. And I haven't been able to find what I wanted because I don't think it exists. But I found something almost even better. So do you want to do plugs first, or should I?
No, go ahead. I'll let you have the final word. I do want to ask you, though, because it's coming up shortly. Have you thought about what we're doing after X-Men Origins? Because we have a show coming up on March 16th, and that's your pick, buddy.
I've been looking, and I got a few in mind. Let me get back to you tomorrow once I've had a chance to kind of sleep on my choices. But yes, I have a few. I have a few in mind. I do.
Woo!
Yeah.
In the archives, we've got in celebration of the Lego Movie and a little mini review that I did on the show. Source material: Batman 66 Volume 1. That's in the archives. I need to address the show from Tuesday. Blog Talk Radio. That's the explanation. Basically, the first 20 minutes of the show, there was some sort of behind-the-scenes technical issue that was happening. I couldn't be heard, and I couldn't hear anything else that was happening. And I was, and my poor guest, just had to kind of sit there while I scrambled to fix the problem. And it really was a Blog Talk Radio thing. It had nothing to do with me. But the good people over at BTR just reset the show after about 20 minutes of this. And then from there on, we did about an hour and 10 minutes talking about Chef's Table Season 1. And if you ever get to hear it, it's great. Here's the problem. If you go in the archives right now, all you hear is the first 20 minutes of me playing random music, including the TV party theme at least a half a dozen times. So I'm waiting for Blog Talk Radio to fix that. I've already complained, and I was told it was going to get handled. No one's gotten back to me, and I'm paying $40 a month. That includes help anytime I need it. And as of right now, it says, hey, our online agents are not available. Fuck you people. Anywho. So we had no problem with Metal Hammer of Doom. The third chair, Jesse Starker, sat this one out, though. He had the projectile leprosy. So it was just me and the Coopster. And a special appearance by Pat Mullen channeling his inner Jeff Jarrett as he did drive-by karaoke, as we called it. He sang With My Baby Tonight. That was a lot of fun. Next week, right here on the RIBN, source material, got the Legends of the Dark Claw. Pat Mullen, in his angelic voice, will be on TV Party Tonight and we will be looking at the first 10 episodes, Season 1, of Sex and Drugs and Rock and Roll. And speaking of sex and drugs and rock and roll, Metal Hammer of Doom will be reviewing the new Steel Panther, Lower the Bar. And speaking of Robert Winfrey, he'll be on Because Winfrey Made Me. We'll be looking at the movie Ink. And then Friday, we'll be unveiling our announcement of Wolverine Week and the subsequent panel discussion of Wolverine the character. That's going to be followed by Wolverine Week. Source material, Old Man Logan on March 6th. The return of Damn You Hollywood for the month of March will begin with Logan. The Metal Hammer of Doom will be chiming in with their participation in Wolverine Week with Entombed Wolverine Blues. That's a real thing, people. And finally, myself and Sean will be back in the courtroom putting X-Men Origins Wolverine on trial. And I assume we shall resume our current roles as prosecutor and defense.
Well, we never decided who was prosecuting and who was defending that one. And actually, you know what? Since I prosecuted, you defended, and in fact, I believe you've defended twice in a row, so I believe it's my turn to defend Wolverine, which I'm comfortable with because while I don't like it as a whole, I think there are things about it that never quite get the credit that they deserve.
Okay.
They tend to really get lost in the discussion of everything else that was so very wrong it should be studied.
Well, I did defend the movie a little bit in the discussion of Wolverine, so I'm good with that. I will change sides here, and I will be fine with prosecuting this puppy.
Yep.
All right. That's all for my plugs. Go ahead and do your thing, babe.
Okay, well, mine's going to be pretty short. Thank you, one and all, to everybody who listens live, who downloads, who likes it and tells a friend, who doesn't like it and tells somebody whose guts that they hate. Thank you all again for the support. It means the world to us. Entertaining you all and informing you is the reason why we do what we do. With that being said, if you have found me either entertaining or informative, first off, double those appointments with your shrink. There's something really, really wrong with you there. But you know what? If you want another good dose of vitamin S, oh God, never let me say that ever again, as a pickup line or otherwise. Times like this, I'm glad Scarlett does listen to the show every week. But if you would like to hear some more of me talking about nerdy things I'm obsessed with, or if you would like to perhaps read written versions of that, say perhaps on nights when you can't catch WWE Network specials, you might want to go and check out FPG News on March 5th, where I will once more have the Comer Codex live with full live match-by-match results all evening of WWE Fastlane. It's the last pay-per-view before WrestleMania 33, or I don't know, last year was WrestleMania Bullhead, and before that it was WrestleMania Play Button, WrestleMania Shuffle, or WrestleMania Pro, WrestleMania Air, WrestleMania Vista, WrestleMania Tournament Edition. I don't know, whatever you want to call it. Chime in with your comments on March 5th while I sit through Fastlane and pray that something gives me a few more reasons to be hopeful about this year's grandest stage of them all. In the meantime, I will be everywhere Mark said that I will be. In particular, I'm really looking forward to defending Wolverine. One, because I like a challenge, and two, because there's some parts of it that aren't going to be nearly as difficult as I'm probably thinking. In the meantime, if you'd like to see a good example of Catwoman portrayed in a little bit of a humorous atmosphere with a lighter bent to it, I would strongly recommend going over to YouTube and checking out Comic Storian's complete story episode, Harley Quinn Road Trip. It is exactly what it sounds like. It is a condensed version of an arc involving a cross-country road trip with Poison Ivy, Selena Kyle, and Harley Quinn. Yeah. It is every bit as much fun as it sounds like it would be. And, in fact, it was good enough that I picked up comic, checked it out myself. It is really excellent. Seriously, it is superb. And for a good overall super serial, y'all, Catwoman story, go and check out Catwoman When in Rome, which is written by one of my all-time favorite comic creative minds, Jeff Loeb. I always forget who drew it. I know it wasn't Jim Lee because Jim Lee was the one who did Hush with Jeff. But it's a great story that involves Selena Kyle traveling to Italy with the Riddler to finally, once and for all, kind of unravel the myth of her parentage. It's a continuation from both Batman The Long Halloween and Batman Dark Victory. Again, 4 stars. Joe Bob says check it out. If you get that, congratulations, you grew up around the same time I did. But otherwise, thank you to Mark for being such a wonderful counterpart and putting up with my smart-assy sense of humor. Thank you all for listening. And this is the one and only Sean Comer. That is the guy that you're not. And I'm reminding you to never dull your colors for someone else's canvas.
All right, once again, this has been a Radulich and Broadcasting Network presentation of the podcast On Trial, Catwoman. Thank you for listening. If you've made it this far, I applaud you. And I hope you'll join us again for our next courtroom drama. Be well, be safe, and behave. Court is now adjourned.